Welcome. Thanks for taking your time to come to this session. I appreciate it. Hopefully you'll get something out of it that you can take back and use in your own organization. I think it's morning still. I still feel like I'm on East Coast time, so I'm getting up between 4 and 5. But it is still the morning here. So again, thanks for coming. I might seem a little nervous, but it's not really nervousness. It's more excitement. As a customer, it's exciting to share stories of success on products that we use and we like and that really solve problems inside of our company. So partial nervousness, mostly excitement. So let's get into the topic. Toys are fun. They entertain us. The problem with toys, though, is that we can lose interest as we get new toys or move on to other forms of entertainment. This is no different than some software that initially seems useful, but is more toy-like and ends up going unused after a period of time. That first picture is of my kid's toy closet at home. My son is 7, my daughter's 3. Has anybody here seen the Toy Story movies? Okay, I see a lot of nods and some raises. I love Toy Story, and my kids love Toy Story, and anytime we can watch it together, it's always a lot of fun. So I think of Toy Story when I look at that closet. I can only imagine the nervous conversations that these toys are having as they sit on the shelves waiting to be used or donated, or even worse, thrown out. Tools, on the other hand, they exist to complete jobs and solve problems efficiently. While we may not use tools every day, when a job comes up, we immediately reach for the appropriate tool. I have a Leatherman in the top drawer of my kitchen. I know we're talking about Swiss Army knives. They're essentially the same. Swiss Army knife sounds a lot better in a title, though. But either way, it's amazing how many jobs you can solve around the house with a multi-tool. I use mine most frequently to fix toys. So AppDynamics is like a multi-tool. It empowers operations, software development, and software QA professionals to investigate software problems and solve problems. During this presentation, I'm going to describe real examples, real problems that SAS has used AppDynamics software to solve the problem and gain insight into our applications. First, a little bit about me. I live in Raleigh, North Carolina. My name is Peter Anderson. I've worked for 4 years at SAS Institute. Prior to that, I worked for a technology consulting and outsourcing company. And all of my time has been spent in the infrastructure and operations side of IT. My mom used to ask me what I do about a couple times a year, ever since I graduated from college. And I would talk to her about operating systems and hardware and firewalls and web servers and application servers, database servers, development, test, and production environments, virtualization, high availability, and application performance. She would nod, try to understand those concepts, but ultimately she'd just ask me again next time, and maybe she could figure it out then. So one time I told her I was like a plumber. I told her I make sure that the data or the information or the water is flowing through the pipes and the fixtures. I said I don't care too much about what's going through the pipes. I just make sure they don't back up. And I think she got it because she started asking me questions like, what's a cloud? And she was very disappointed to find out what the cloud was. A little bit about SAS as a company. SAS is the largest privately held software company in the world. Founded in 1976, SAS is the market leader in advanced analytics and data management software. Our headquarters is in Cary, North Carolina. We have 14,000 employees globally and customers in 139 different countries. SAS has achieved 39 consecutive years of growth and profitability, with 2014 revenue just over $3 billion. So this is a little bit about my environment. I work in a group that falls under our IT infrastructure engineering. My customers, so the people I work with day to day to get things done, are in our internal development enterprise solutions group. Collectively, with our team and theirs, we support 65 custom web applications, installations of SaaS solutions, and other third-party software that run SaaS's business operations. Now let's talk about some real-life examples how SaaS has used AppDynamics. The first feature of AppDynamics that has been extremely useful is flow maps. So most of you know this, so you can tune out if you want. AppDynamics flow maps expose actionable information in a visual form that is easily understood. Applications are dynamic, distributed, and change regularly with agile development as new features are continuously delivered. Visio architecture diagrams like we see here, they're great when you first create them. You feel such a great accomplishment when you finally create something like that. They become stale, out of date very quickly as business requirements change. The AppDynamics flow maps, which makes them so interesting, is that they're like this live Visio. And I think, Steve, you told us that first meeting. They're like that live Visio that they keep themselves up to date. You can start tuning in now. Here's an example of flow maps for our e-commerce site. I've zoomed out quite a bit because we want to hide the private details. But you've all seen flow maps before, so you recognize the asynchronous flow of data through different application tiers and queues. When we first demonstrated the capabilities of AppDynamics to our management team in Enterprise Solutions, this picture captured everyone's slide. Managers love pictures, right? Carl, you're not laughing. So this captured everyone's attention. And we got this map just by deploying Java agents to all of the components in the front-end store and our back-end fulfillment applications. This flow represents, and why it was so important to the managers is because this flow spans multiple development teams and multiple infrastructure operations teams. So being able to pull everybody together to one picture is something that we hadn't been able to do. A Visio diagram, something that we try to depict something like this, would take days to complete. It would have a tendency to become out of date as it lags development. Being able to see the flow map for individual business applications as a subset of this overall application flow map further proved the power of AppDynamics to us. Having this map, the diagnosis and triage of incidents where orders are not being fulfilled is much quicker to accomplish. First time I ever used a flow map to solve a problem was in a test environment for a new application that was being developed by our customers. The developer called me on Friday afternoon and said that the wrong data was showing up in the UI of their application. So she asked me if I could check the data sources to make sure we were pointing at the right database, and we were. We checked all the external property files for our application just to make sure they were all confined to the test environment, and they were. AppDynamics was new for us. We had instrumented this test environment, but hadn't really spent a whole lot of time configuring it. So we decided, well, let's see what AppDynamics has gathered for us. So we logged in, pulled up the flow map, and there was the answer right there. We could see, without a doubt, that the application was still talking to our development database. I mean, that was a fact. There was no getting around it. So with that information in the database name, our developer was able to search the code base for the name and found a hard-coded reference to it inside the application that hadn't been switched out. So AppDynamics is now the first place I look for similar type issues. AppDynamics instrumentation was fast-tracked into our production environment. We had Java agent and the EUM to debug a performance issue that had impacted a particular user for several weeks. Looking at the flow map for the application after it had been instrumented, we noticed that the production environment was making a web service call to a test server. We knew that wasn't right. While that wasn't the source of the performance issue, it was definitely a functional issue that we wouldn't have known about until probably somebody noticed it inside the application. So we were able to fix that just by having this visual representation in the flow map. The next area AppDynamics has helped SAS is in development and test areas or environments. I know we just talked a little bit about it, but it's been really crucial in those areas. So AppDynamics APM can be used in development and test environments to tune database queries and optimize application code. Having the historical data allows for easy comparison of performance between application releases or parameter changes. So a large data load into a core production application was expected to take 36 hours to complete over a weekend. The system wouldn't be down, but it would be relatively unusable as performance would have been rather bad. So it was critical that that it didn't run longer than 36 hours, or it would have impacts to our Asia Pacific users that came online first for the work week. So in a test environment, a performance test of the load of the data showed database queries that could definitely be improved. The developer who had gone to AppDynamics training and has become a really huge advocate of AppDynamics on the development side, he tuned queries, and he could quickly quantify the impact using AppDynamics and the historical data. With the performance improvements made during testing, we saved 5 hours in processing time, which means the job completed well before users from APAC came online. One of our application servers was running out of memory in production. This was happening when multiple users were doing very large searches within the application. It couldn't pull back all the data. So the goal was to run a performance test simulating that type of load and determine what JVM settings we needed to have in to account for that kind of condition. So the benefit to having AppDynamics in our performance test environment was that a performance engineer, he could run the test on his time frame. He didn't have to organize a SWAT team to look at server, to look at application while he's running the test. We had the historical. We could go back and look at it when it was convenient for each of us, which, it's great when you can work on your own time frame. So we were able to see the next day after we completed the test that the memory setting that we had put in would handle the load in production. So another benefit was that we gained confidence that making this setting change in production would resolve the issue. So this is a really, really great problem that was solved with collaboration, partnering, and the right tool. SAS Factory Miner is a product we sell, so SAS sells it to our customers. And it's a web-based predictive modeling tool that our customers use to automatically pick the best statistical model for each segment of data. I don't know what that means either. The SAS R&D software performance engineer was testing a new release of SAS Factory Miner before we shipped it out to our customers. And he was noticing a long transaction in the application that he could measure in minutes. So he knew something was going on. Fortunately, that group, which falls in our R&D organization, was aware of the investment that SAS IT had made in AppDynamics. So they decided to try it out. And here's where the partnering came in. I hear partnering a lot at this conference, and I think we've all had the experience where AppDynamics has been a great partner to help us just solve problems and do things efficiently. So our TAM came on site the next day, and in the morning he sat with the performance engineer who'd never seen AppDynamics before, They instrumented the Tomcats, they ran a test, they narrowed it down to the exact line of code that was doing a logging routine. It was logging to the server, and it was taking 89 seconds. So with that information, and this is all out-of-the-box configuration. They didn't do anything to the configuration. It saw the business transaction. They can immediately drill down into the call graph to see that information. So with the pinpoint diagnosis, the information was shared with the development team, and they could spend their time fixing the problem versus spending their time to diagnose the problem and have to fix the problem after they found it. So let's explore the concept of fact-based problem solving and some real-world examples at SAS. When applications aren't performing well, there are any number of hardware, software, resource issues that could be causing the problem. Having performance data in the context of business transactions can greatly reduce the mean time to innocence for components not contributing to the problem. As with the previous example with SAS Factory Miner, having the quick triage and diagnosis of the exact time spent in software eliminates that method of hypothesizing and proving or disproving that hypothesis with proprietary tools at the network, database, server, storage, application level. My first example of using facts gathered by AppDynamics in the context of a business transaction is for a point-of-sale system that we run in the cafeterias on campus at SAS. And during some mornings, some of the terminals, they can't refresh the menu items for the day. First world problems, right? But it's a real problem in my department because we own the server. So using AppDynamics, we looked at the business transaction for that specific refreshing of the menu. So we know we're in the right location. And we could see 70 SQL queries executing just to refresh that one menu. Each of the queries were returning in 300 milliseconds or less. But in aggregate, they were taking over 20 seconds inside the server. And at 20 seconds, there's a pre-configured timeout on the client that they give up in timeout. So traditional database monitoring tools did not identify any of these queries as long-running. The SQL monitoring tools were not capable of grouping the queries in the context of the business application transaction, like AppDynamics. For one of our internal applications that uses Wiki, there was an intermittent 3-year-old functional issue, 3 years old, where some wiki edits, it was intermittent, some wiki edits were being attributed to the wrong user ID. 25 people were involved in troubleshooting over 3 years, no resolution. Over 100 hours had been spent on this problem. And one of Alex's engineers, who we've worked very closely with to instrument on both our web side and our internal side. So with the AppDynamics PHP agent, I don't know, it might have been an eval, who knows. The application flow was mapped, and we'd never used the PHP agent, clearly, because we didn't have a license for it. So the application flow was mapped, and the issue was isolated to a database update statement. So this is an engineer, an IT guy, who's diving into the code of a PHP application, drilling into the SQL query that is updating this, when you update a wiki entry. And he saw that there was apparently a global user ID variable being used in that update statement that had the potential of being overwritten by another part of the application. So solving this problem turned some skeptics of AppDynamics into real believers. So my last example for today, I could go on for a long time, but you guys have other things to do. My last example for today is a quote from the lead developer responsible for customizations of a third-party content management system that we use at SAS. So upon first seeing the information AppDynamics gathered from the application, he was able to take action to fix issues that were uncovered. I came from a systems integration background, so we dealt with third-party packaged applications that we heavily customized all the time. Would have loved to have AppDynamics back then. The challenge with customized commercial software is evaluating whether performance or functional problems are part of the base product or whether they're part of your customizations. So by instrumenting the code, being able to drill down to the call graphs, you can tell whether it's the base code or whether it's your code. Which makes, and we've used this with our Jira software, which makes support calls to the vendor more collaborative and fact-based. All right, I have some closing thoughts. First, approach problems collaboratively. None of us work in a bubble. We all have colleagues and customers and other departments with whom we need to work to deliver quality software solutions. I mean, we're all at this conference because we want to collaborate. We want to share ideas about APM. We want to see what other people are doing effectively. Second, by being transparent and not hoarding the data or information, we can improve self-service, share facts about performance, and improve collaboration with our colleagues and customers. Whether it's by building dashboards or just making the raw data that AppDynamics gathers about application, share that information. So we often talk about time and efficiency, and we try to quantify time in terms of money. Money is a resource that we understand and we can actually control a lot easier than time. I want you to consider time as your most valuable resource because unlike money, time cannot be earned, time cannot be found, time cannot be borrowed. Sorry, my notes won't even go up. And time can't be printed. So time is only spent. So if we value time as we should, this last point is very, very obvious. Just choose the right tool for the job. So thank you all very much. I think we might have some time left over. No pun intended. But the time is yours, so if you guys want to go, or if you want to ask some questions, I can stay here. Oh, actually, I did want to go back. I see AJ's here. I went to his presentation yesterday for Container Store. So I wanted to go back to that first slide. Okay, so that's my kid's toy closet. Do you know what that is inside? You got it. Yeah, so that was cool yesterday. I just put that connection together this morning when I was practicing once more. And I thought it was really cool that, the online experience bringing me into the store to customize that solution and then me being able to go and install it. I didn't use my multi-tool for that, though. It needed a drill.
And the solution is adaptable.
That's right. Yeah, absolutely. So does anybody have any questions? Anything you want to talk about?
One of the biggest challenges connecting the developers that AppDynamics in terms of the boundaries points. So they always claim my queries are optimized for how can it go?
Yeah. So he's asking, what's the biggest challenge to convincing developers that their queries weren't optimized already? I think with a tool like this, like we talked about fact-based problem solving, having the facts, you can't dispute facts. So either it's unacceptable, and your thresholds are different too. So either it's acceptable for your query to run for half a second, or it's not. Fortunately, we work with a lot of really good developers that we have a great relationship with, and we trust each other's opinions. So if I recommend something to them that they really try to look at, they're accepting of those ideas. And so similarly, way back, if they really need something or want something, we're kind of share those ideas. So I think it's just based on the facts, whether the facts are acceptable or not.
So one quick question. Have you ever measured in any of your production agents that AppDynamics consuming more than 2% CPU?
We don't really measure that. Sorry. Do we have a mic by any chance? Here, I'll go ahead.
So the question is whether they measured in any of the production agents at any point of time, the AppDynamics agent, any of the machine agent or the database agent consuming more than 2% CPU. So we just want to make sure.
Right.
Not the deployment with customers, whether they are focusing on monitoring that and go back to the AppDynamics and then share that.
So we don't really look for that. In our application server, we generally have a lot of resources. We're very confident in the metrics that we've been given on the overhead. I had another point, but I lost it. But we have, to your point, we have seen the safeguards of the Java agents before. In that application that I said, we had JVM running out of memory and crashing the JVM eventually. We were trying to investigate the problem, and we're seeing gaps in data. I was like, we don't have any memory data from this JVM for this period of time. And we eventually realized it and looked at the Java agent logs. It's like, okay, the Java agent said, hey, I'm running out of memory. I better reduce my footprint and shut down. So the Java agent went away and gave whatever piece of memory in the JVM for the application to use. So. It's a good question. Our department, we had Wiley tools. They were useful. They solved a lot of really complex problems a long time ago. But it got to be more shelfware because it was difficult to instrument. Difficult just to find the time to configure it to get the information you're looking for. So it really became a tool of last resort versus a tool to really get you to the cause of the problem faster. Any other questions?
When did you start deploying and when did you go to production?
So it was just about a year ago that Steve came on site for a demo. And we stopped him about 45 minutes in. We said, we have a problem. I mean, can we try this out right now? And he was flexible. We discussed, whatever legal agreements my management and he needed to talk about. So the sales engineer actually came down to my desk. One of my colleagues who was in the meeting, he left early to go spin up a VM for our controller. So we went down, had a VM ready for a controller. The sales engineer installed the controller. He had an hour before he had to get to the airport. He installed the controller. We had the Java agent that was causing us a problem. We couldn't restart the JVM because it was in production, but we had it staged ready for the next maintenance that we could restart it. And that just goes back to the partnering that everybody talks about. All of our interactions from sales all the way through to support and engineering have been that kind of let's just solve a problem. And then finishing off that question, we instrumented our development and test environments within a month after we purchased and took time really to configure the applications because there's 65 applications. So there was a lot of applications. They're all a little bit different. So you want to get the configuration right so that when you go to production, you don't have to redo that. So we spent a lot of time with developers configuring AppDynamics to gather the true key business transactions and back-end interactions that they had. Then we were able to export those configurations, and before we instrumented it production, we have two separate controllers, one for dev test, one for production. So we exported from our test controller and imported that application configuration into prod. That way, during a weekend maintenance, that we were able to restart everything in production. As soon as that was complete, all the JVMs were reporting in and had the production configuration, so they were already gathering the right things that were important to the different teams. And that production, so we took about 2 months, probably between test in production, but that was all, configuring and making sure we were prepared when we went to production. We could have done it in 3 weeks, but that extra time really saves time in the future. Actually, there was another question over here. Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah, you got to know the application a little bit. So some of the applications at my team, by the way, Carl and Alex, they're the two managers who worked with Steve to originally bring AppDynamics into SAS. And Alex's team owns the content management system, so I can't speak to that specifically. But we have instrumented things like Jira, Confluence, and as long as you can find the JVM start script, as long as you can find where all the JVM arguments are setting, you can get the Java agent loaded up, no problem. Then the trick is obviously configuring AppDynamics to understand business transactions. So I guess it depends on the level of experience you have with the application, and I guess how forthcoming the third party might be with helping you. But for the most part, anything we've had to do, we've never had to go to the vendor and say, can you help us figure out what all these transactions are? We can pretty readily tell what are the key business transactions for third-party apps. They're on-prem, yeah. Yeah. Not right now. We have a custom internal alerting program that any alerts that come out of AppDynamics runs a script that calls into that custom alerting program. So we don't alert directly from AppDynamics. We just fire off scripts that contact our alerting, and then it can associate with the correct CIs in our CMDB and get the right alerts to the right people. So, we do, yeah. We do have an operations center. They have not been onboarded onto AppDynamics yet, though. Our department, I guess SAS is a really big place. Our department kind of fills that niche in business operations. So we're kind of a small piece of the overall SAS ecosystem. But that is certainly an opportunity that we have when they're looking at dashboards, if that's something that is useful. Typically, that operations is more, okay, a 7-1 alert came in, we're going to dispatch the right teams that need to do it. So they don't really do a whole lot of initial troubleshooting on issues. Any other questions? All right. Well, thanks, guys. If anybody else has any questions, I'll be up here.